Setting price caps on life-saving pharmaceuticals may sound compassionate, but it could ultimately cost more lives in the long run than it may be anticipated to save in the immediate future. By destroying the incentives for pharmaceutical innovation, price ceilings would prevent the development of future treatments that could help millions of patients. Pharmaceutical development requires massive fixed costs with extraordinary risk. A single medication can cost billions of dollars to bring to market through research, clinical trials, and regulatory approval. Companies must recover not only the cost of successful drugs, but also the expenses of the vast majority of experimental drugs that never make it to market. For every drug that succeeds, dozens fail after consuming enormous resources. These development costs are almost entirely fixed, the same whether a drug helps 1 patient or 1 million patients. Once a formula is discovered and approved, manufacturing additional pills costs relatively little. The real expense lies in the upfront research, testing, and regulatory compliance that can exceed billions of dollars per approved drug. Companies must price their successful drugs high enough to recover not only the development costs of that specific drug, but also the costs of all the failed attempts that preceded it. Without this ability to recoup investments, no rational company would invest in drug development. Price caps sever the link between pharmaceutical innovation and financial reward. When governments impose artificial ceilings on drug prices, they reduce or even eliminate the profit potential that justifies massive upfront investments in uncertain research ventures. Consider a pharmaceutical company deciding whether to invest in developing a treatment for a rare disease. The research might cost $1 billion over 15 years with a limited chance of success. Under a free market, the company knows that if they succeed, they can price the drug to recover their investment and generate profits that justify taking the risk. But with price ceilings, even a successful drug might not generate enough revenue to cover development costs. Faced with this reality, investors and companies would rationally redirect their resources towards other industries where they can profit from successful innovations. The immediate effect would be fewer new drugs entering development pipelines, and the long-term consequence would be a dramatic slowdown in medical breakthroughs. Price caps create a classic example of what economists call the seen versus the unseen. The seen effect is immediate. Existing drug prices fall, providing relief to current patients. The unseen effect unfolds over years. Promising treatments that would have been developed never materialize, condemning future patients to suffering or death from diseases that could have been cured in the absence of price controls. A patient facing a choice between paying a high price for a life-saving drug or dying may gladly pay the price. But patients cannot choose to purchase drugs that were never developed because price controls destroyed the incentives to create them. These future patients have no voice in today's policy debates, yet they bear the ultimate cost of well-intentioned but economically destructive price controls. A price cap might help thousands of current patients afford existing treatments, but it also could prevent the development of drugs that could help even more future patients. There's also the fundamental question of property rights. When pharmaceutical companies develop new drugs, they own the patents on those innovations. These patents represent the fruits of their investment, risk-taking, and hard work. Price caps effectively confiscate part of that property by forcing companies to sell their products below market-clearing prices. This violates basic principles of private property that underpin free market capitalism. If governments can arbitrarily set prices for pharmaceutical drugs, what prevents them from doing the same for other forms of intellectual property or physical assets? The patent system already balances innovation incentives with public access through its limited duration. Patents eventually expire, allowing generic competition that drives prices down dramatically. This provides both the initial incentive for innovation and eventual broad access to successful treatments. People of good faith can of course disagree about the appropriate length of patent protection. Some might argue for shorter patent periods to accelerate generic competition, others might advocate for longer protection to strengthen the incentives for innovation. These debates involve genuine trade-offs, and reasonable people can disagree productively over how long the patents should last. But price caps represent a different approach. Rather than adjusting the duration of patent protection, price ceilings destroy part of the value of patents during their entire term, thus lowering the incentive for innovation. Some might argue that governments should fund drug development directly to avoid the need for high prices, but government agencies face the same economic constraints as private companies. They must still pay for research, testing, and the costs of failure. More importantly, they lack profit incentives that drive efficient resource allocation and risk-taking in competitive markets. Government-funded research also creates problems with priority setting. Without market prices to signal which treatments patients value most, political considerations may determine research priorities. Politicians might fund research on on diseases that affect many voters with minor ailments rather than targeting the most urgent medical needs of a smaller group of people who in a free market would be willing to pay far more for treatment. Private pharmaceutical companies, by contrast, have strong incentives to develop treatments that balance market size with the benefits a pharmaceutical provides to patients. To wrap up, price caps on life-saving drugs would destroy the incentives for pharmaceutical innovation, which in the long term could cost more lives than they are anticipated to help in the present. While the immediate effects of lower prices may appear beneficial to some, the long-term consequences such as less pharmaceutical innovation and more preventable deaths could be far worse. Rather than imposing price controls, policymakers should respect property rights and allow markets to function. The patent system already provides a mechanism for balancing incentives for innovation with an eventual increase in competition driving down prices. Setting price caps, however, would disincentivize future investment into pharmaceuticals that could save even more lives than any anticipated immediate benefits from price controls. If you enjoyed this video, check the description for ways that you can support me and consider sharing this video with a friend.